Federal agents.
What's going on? It's almost 3 in the morning.
Ma'am, step back. We have a warrant.
A warrant for what? Who are you looking for?
Immigration enforcement action.
Immigration, but I live here.
That's not relevant right now. Ma'am, put your hands behind your back.
I'm a federal immigration judge. There must be a mistake.
Hands behind your back.
That moment changed everything. Judge Diane Morrison was holding 6 cases exposing ICE agents paid bonuses per deportation. 48 hours earlier, she denied deportation for an ICE whistleblower about to expose the scheme. This wasn't random, it was retaliation. What happened next would send the lead agent to prison for 23 years, cost a detention company $42 million in fines, and expose a conspiracy destroying dozens of families. It started with forged papers and one judge who refused to stay quiet. Comment where you're watching from. This could happen in your neighborhood. Hit subscribe. This gets worse before better. Diane Morrison lived in Millbrook Heights, an upscale neighborhood where problems didn't happen at 2:47 in the morning. She had been a federal immigration judge for 17 years, presiding over cases that determined whether families stayed in America or got sent back to countries they had fled decades ago. She'd lived in this house for 10 years. 0 complaints from neighbors. 0 incidents with law enforcement. Her husband was traveling for work. The house had been completely quiet all evening. But her phone told a different story. 6 missed calls from her court clerk, all within the past 2 hours. The last voicemail was marked urgent. Judge Morrison, there are irregularities being reported with your records. Please call back immediately. She hadn't seen the messages until the pounding started. On her desk in the home office sat 6 active case files. All 6 involved ICE agents accused of receiving cash bonuses for hitting deportation quotas. The allegations were specific: $500 per person removed from the country regardless of whether the deportation was legally justified. 48 hours earlier, she had denied a deportation order for an ICE whistleblower who was scheduled to testify about the bonus scheme in federal court. Now 4 ICE agents stood at her door. The lead agent identified himself as Marcus Kane. He didn't show a warrant. Immigration enforcement action. You need to come with us immediately. Diane kept her voice steady. I'm a United States citizen. I was born in Atlanta. I'm a federal immigration judge. Kane's response came fast. Ma'am, we have orders. You need to come with us for processing. Processing for what? Verification of status. I just told you my status. We need to verify that. Diane walked to her office and returned with 2 items: her federal judicial identification badge issued by the Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts and her original naturalization certificate from 1985. She held up the judicial ID. This is issued by the federal court system. I've been a judge for 17 years. Kane examined the ID for maybe 3 seconds. Ma'am, this could be fake. We're taking you in for verification. He didn't call a supervisor. He didn't verify her identity through any database. He didn't contact the courthouse. Kane didn't need to verify. He'd already decided. What Kane didn't know was that Diane's home security system had 6 cameras with audio recording capability. Every word of this conversation, every refusal to verify, every illegal step forward, the cameras were recording everything. Kane didn't wait for permission. He placed his boot against the door and pushed. The chain latch snapped. 4 agents entered without warrant, without consent, without legal authority. Diane stepped back and stated clearly, "You're violating the 4th Amendment in a federal judge's home." Kane's response was immediate. ICE authority supersedes. Step aside. For 17 years, she'd ruled on constitutional law. She'd taught courses on 4th Amendment protections. She'd written opinions defending citizens against unlawful searches. Now she stood in her own home while federal agents ignored every principle she'd sworn to uphold. The camera was recording. It always was. Agents spread through the house, one toward the kitchen, another upstairs. A third walked directly to Diane's home office. Diane couldn't see what happened next. The camera could. The female agent opened Diane's file cabinet, pulled a document from inside her jacket, and slipped it into the middle drawer between naturalization records and tax files. 8 seconds. The camera caught everything. Outside lights turned on in neighboring houses. Mrs. Chen, a retired attorney next door, heard the commotion and looked out. 4 federal agents inside Diane's home. She knew Diane was a federal judge. She knew this was wrong. Mrs. Chen called the courthouse emergency hotline. Across the street, a neighbor started filming. Two more neighbors emerged recording on phones. Kane noticed the audience but didn't stop. He walked back to Diane holding a document. Your naturalization paperwork has discrepancies. You lied on your citizenship application. Diane looked at the paper. Impossible. I was born in Atlanta, natural-born citizen. Kane turned the document toward her. Birthplace listed Mexico City. Diane had never seen it. I was born in Atlanta. That document isn't mine. Where did you get it? Found it in your file cabinet? No, you didn't. Ma'am, you falsified federal documents. Coming with us. Kane pulled out handcuffs. Neighbors outside shouted. Mrs. Chen called from her porch. She's a federal judge. This is illegal. Kane ignored her. The handcuffs clicked around Diane's wrists in her own living room in front of neighbors who'd known her 10 years. Diane stayed calm, her voice level and clear. My home security has 6 cameras with audio recording. They captured every word, you entering without warrant, refusing to verify my identity, and your agent placing that document in my cabinet approximately 4 minutes ago. Kane's expression shifted. Slightly. Enough. Ma'am, you're under arrest for falsifying immigration documents. The cameras recorded everything. Kane said nothing. He led her toward the door. The camera was recording. It always was. Mrs. Chen still on phone with courthouse. Neighbors still filming. Diane Morrison, federal immigration judge with 17 years on the bench, walked out of her home in handcuffs by ICE agents who just planted evidence in front of 6 security cameras. Would you have filmed if you were on that street? Would you have called for help or stayed quiet? Hoping it would end? Comment yes if you'd risk getting involved as a witness. What happened next proves exactly why witnesses matter when authority goes rogue. They took Diane to an ICE detention facility 40 minutes outside the city, processed like any undocumented immigrant. Fingerprints, mugshot, property inventory, then a concrete cell with a metal bench. She asked for her attorney. You'll get counsel when we verify your status. How long will that take? As long as it takes. 8 hours passed. No phone call, no attorney, no update. A federal immigration judge sat in detention waiting for agents to verify citizenship they could confirm with one courthouse phone call. Meanwhile, Mrs. Chen wasn't waiting. She'd called the courthouse emergency hotline the moment Diane was taken. Within 20 minutes, the night supervisor contacted the Department of Homeland Security, Inspector General, and FBI field office. The neighbor across the street uploaded his window footage to cloud storage and sent the link to Mrs. Chen, who forwarded it to the courthouse. Diane's court clerk secured courthouse security footage showing Diane arriving for work the previous day, documented as a sitting federal judge with full credentials. Timeline building. By sunrise, attorney David Brennan had been contacted by 3 sources about Diane's detention. Brennan was one of the state's most prominent civil rights attorneys. He'd worked with Diane on multiple immigration cases. He arrived at the facility at 6:47 a.m., demanding immediate access. She's still being processed. He said he'd wait. By 9:30 a.m., consultation room access granted. Diane gave him a precise account starting from the pounding at 2:47 a.m., the 6 case files, the whistleblower deportation denied 48 hours earlier, the forged document Kane pulled from her cabinet, and the 6 security cameras. Brennan called Diane's security company. Footage downloaded to encrypted laptop within 30 minutes. What he saw made him stop playback twice. Camera 3, home office, 2:54 a.m. Female eye. CE agent opened Diane's file cabinet, removed document from jacket, placed it in middle drawer. Timestamp clear, action unmistakable. Camera 1, living room, 3:02 a.m. Kane held up same document, claimed he found it in her cabinet. Used it to arrest a federal judge. Audio crystal clear on every angle. Diane repeatedly stating she was U.S. citizen. Repeatedly stating she was federal judge. Repeatedly asking Kane to verify identity through official channels. Kane repeatedly refusing. Brennan requested immediate meeting with ICE facility supervisor and detention director. By 2:15 p.m., Diane released. 14 hours after arrest. No charges filed. ICE statement. Misunderstanding regarding documentation, matter resolved. Brennan responded for the record outside the facility. A misunderstanding. You raided a federal judge's home without warrant, planted forged evidence, detained her 14 hours without counsel. That's not misunderstanding. That's federal crime. But Brennan wasn't finished. He filed subpoenas for all records related to Marcus Kane's unit over 6 months. What came back was devastating. Kane's unit 47 raids during that period. 43 targeted naturalized citizens, not undocumented immigrants. Justification, every case. Discrepancies in naturalization paperwork, or suspected falsification. 31 of those 43 deported before proper case review. Pattern: Brennan couldn't ignore every single one, had either publicly criticized ICE policies, testified against ICE agents, or filed complaints about ICE misconduct. This wasn't enforcement. It was retaliation. It wasn't one raid. It was a system. Kane's unit had systematically targeted people who spoke against ICE fabricated violations, used authority to silence critics through deportation. 6 months minimum. 31 people deported who never should have been touched. And they just made the catastrophic mistake of trying it on a federal judge with 6 cameras recording every second. The FBI opened a full investigation within 72 hours of Diane's release. Federal agents executed search warrants on Marcus Kane's home, his office, and his personal devices. What they found was damning. Kane's phone contained text message threads going back 8 months. The messages discussed targeting strategies, shared names of people who had criticized ICE publicly, and celebrated successful deportations like victories in a game. One message from Kane to another agent: got another activist judge blocker. 500 in the bank. The bonus structure was explicit. $500 per deportation processed, paid through a private contractor working with the detention facility. The more people Kane's unit removed from the country, the more money they made. Speed mattered more than accuracy. Quotas mattered more than law. Another text from Kane sent 3 days before Diane's raid: target the judges blocking our ops. They think they're untouchable. But the text messages were just the beginning. As news of the investigation spread, victims started coming forward. Dozens of them. A doctor who had practiced medicine in the United States for 23 years lost his medical license during an 8-month detention. Kane's unit had raided his home at 4 a.m., claimed his naturalization paperwork had discrepancies, and detained him before he could contact an attorney. By the time the case was reviewed and dismissed, he'd lost his hospital position, his income, and his home. His family was homeless for 6 months. An elderly woman who had lived in America for 35 years was deported back to the country she had fled as a refugee. She died 4 months after deportation alone, with no family present. Her daughter testified that her mother had testified against an ICE agent in a civil rights case 2 years earlier. 3 weeks after her testimony, Kane's unit showed up at her door with a deportation order based on allegedly false information in her original asylum application from 1989. 14 children were separated from their parents and placed in emergency foster care, while their mothers and fathers fought deportation cases from detention. The parents had all been targeted by Kane's unit. The justification was always the same: discrepancies in decades-old paperwork that had been accepted and verified multiple times before. The forensic computer analysis revealed the scope of the fraud: 67 forged documents, all created on the same printer in Kane's office. All bore digital fingerprints traced directly to Kane's desktop computer. The metadata showed the creation dates. Every single document had been created after the target had criticized ICE policies, filed complaints, or testified in cases against ICE agents. Kane wasn't investigating immigration fraud. He was manufacturing it. Federal prosecutors arrested Kane at his home on a Tuesday morning. 5 other members of his unit were arrested the same day. The indictments were comprehensive conspiracy to deprive civil rights evidence, tampering, falsification of official documents, false imprisonment, and honest services fraud. The investigation also revealed the financial incentive structure that made the scheme possible. The detention facility was receiving $400 per day for each person held. The private company operating the facility had profited more than $40 million over 18 months from the increased detention numbers Kane's unit generated. Text messages between the facility director and company executives showed the arrangement clearly. Keep the beds full. We'll handle the paperwork. This trial began 6 months after Diane's arrest. The prosecution was led by a team of federal attorneys who presented the case as organized racketeering conducted under color of law. Lead prosecutor Amanda Chen made the government's position clear in opening statements. This isn't immigration enforcement. This is organized crime dressed in a federal uniform. These defendants used government authority to target, terrorize, and profit from innocent people. They destroyed families. They falsified evidence. They corrupted the immigration system for money. Kane's defense attorney argued that his client was following orders from supervisors who wanted increased deportation numbers. He claimed Kane never intended to harm anyone and was simply doing his job under pressure. The prosecution's response was direct. Following orders, he forged 67 documents. That's not following orders. That's manufacturing evidence. That's a crime. The victim testimony lasted 3 days. The doctor described losing everything he'd built over 2 decades because of a raid based on documents that didn't exist until Kane created them. The daughter of the elderly woman who died after deportation told the jury about her mother's final months alone in a country she hadn't seen in 35 years, unable to understand why the country she'd called home had sent her away. Parents described the moment Child Protective Services took their children while they were being processed for deportation based on falsified paperwork. Then Diane took the stand. She testified for 4 hours. She described her 17 years as a federal immigration judge presiding over more than 4,200 cases. She explained the difference between legitimate immigration enforcement and the persecution she'd experienced. She walked the jury through the night of her arrest step by step, describing how every procedure had been violated, how every opportunity to verify her identity had been ignored, how evidence had been planted while cameras recorded it all. And then she said something the jury wouldn't forget. I have decided 4,200 immigration cases. I know what enforcement looks like. I know what persecution looks like. What happened to me that night happens to families every single day. The only difference is that I had cameras. I had an attorney. I had a position that made people listen. Most victims of this scheme had none of those things. They were silenced, deported, and erased. Marcus Kane knew that. He counted on it. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Marcus Kane, conspiracy evidence, tampering, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and false imprisonment. His partner guilty on 6 counts. The other unit members guilty on charges ranging from conspiracy to falsification of documents. Kane got 23 years in federal prison. Some people said it was too harsh for someone who claimed he was just following orders and trying to do his job under pressure. Others said 23 years wasn't nearly enough for a man who destroyed dozens of families, deported innocent people, and corrupted the immigration system for money. What do you think? Was 23 years too harsh or not enough? Comment your verdict, because the sentencing judge explained exactly why she chose that number, and her reasoning matters. FBI opened full investigation within 72 hours. Agents executed search warrants on Marcus Kane's home office and devices. What they found was damning. Kane's phone contained text threads going back 8 months, discussing targeting strategies, sharing names of critics, celebrating deportations like game victories. One message: got another activist judge blocker, 500 in the bank. Bonus structure explicit, $500 per deportation paid through private contractor. More removals, more money. Speed over accuracy, quotas over law. Another text 3 days before Diane's raid: target the judges blocking our ops. They think they're untouchable. But texts were just beginning. As investigations spread, victims came forward. Dozens. A doctor who practiced 23 years lost his medical license during 8-month detention. Kane raided his home 4 a.m., claimed naturalization discrepancies detained him before attorney contact. By case review and dismissal, he'd lost hospital position, income, home, family homeless 6 months. An elderly woman living in America 35 years was deported to the country she'd fled as refugee. Died 4 months later alone. Her daughter testified the woman had testified against an ICE agent 2 years earlier. 3 weeks after testimony, Kane's unit arrived with deportation order based on allegedly false 1989 asylum information. 14 children separated from parents placed in emergency foster care while mothers and fathers fought cases from detention. All parents targeted by Kane's unit. Justification: always same discrepancies in decades-old paperwork previously accepted and verified. Forensic analysis revealed fraud scope. 67 forged documents. Same printer Kane's office, digital fingerprints traced to Kane's desktop. Metadata showed creation dates every document created after target criticized ICE, filed complaints, or testified against agents. Kane wasn't investigating fraud. He was manufacturing it. Prosecutors arrested Kane Tuesday morning. 5 unit members arrested same day. Indictments: comprehensive conspiracy evidence, tampering, falsification, false imprisonment, honest services, fraud. Investigation revealed financial incentive structure. Detention facility receiving $400 daily per person held. Private company operating facility profited over $40 million in 18 months from increased numbers Kane's unit generated. Text messages between facility director and executives. Keep the beds full. We'll handle paperwork. Trial began 6 months after Diane's arrest. Federal prosecutors presented case as organized racketeering under color of law. Lead prosecutor Amanda Chen in opening: "This isn't immigration enforcement. This is organized crime in federal uniform. Defendants used government authority to target, terrorize, and profit from innocent people. They destroyed families, falsified evidence, or corrupted immigration system for money." Kane's defense: following orders from supervisors wanting increased deportation numbers. Never intended harm, simply doing his job under pressure. Prosecution response: direct. Following orders. He forged 67 documents. That's not orders. That's manufacturing evidence. That's crime. Victim testimony lasted 3 days. Doctor described losing everything built over 2 decades because of raid based on documents that didn't exist until Kane created them. Daughter of elderly woman told jury about mother's final months alone in country she hadn't seen 35 years, unable to understand why her home sent her away. Parents described Child Protective Services taking children during processing for deportation based on falsified paperwork. Then Diane took stand. 4 hours testimony. 17 years as federal immigration judge over 4,200 cases. Explained difference between legitimate enforcement and persecution she experienced. Walked jury through arrest night, step by step. Every procedure violated, every identity verification opportunity ignored. Evidence planted while cameras recorded. Then she said something jury wouldn't forget. "I've decided 4,200 immigration cases. I know what enforcement looks like. I know what persecution looks like. What happened to me happens to families every day. Only difference: I had cameras. The attorney. Position that made people listen. Most victims had none of those. They were silenced, deported, erased. Marcus Kane knew that. He counted on it." Jury deliberated 6 hours. Guilty all counts. Marcus Kane: conspiracy evidence, tampering, deprivation of rights, false imprisonment. Partner guilty 6 counts. Other unit members guilty on conspiracy to falsification. Kane got 23 years federal prison. Some said too harsh for someone claiming he followed orders, did his job under pressure. Others said 23 years wasn't nearly enough for destroying dozens of families, deporting innocent people, corrupting immigration system for money. What do you think? 23 years too harsh or not enough? Comment your verdict. The sentencing judge explained exactly why she chose that number, and her reasoning matters. Marcus Kane, 23 years, federal prison. Partner, 8 years. Other unit members, 6 to 16 years, depending on involvement. Private detention company, $42 million fine, permanently barred from immigration detention operations. Sentencing judge's reasoning clear. You weaponize government power against people you swore to protect. Manufactured evidence. Destroyed families. Corrupted immigration system for profit. Not mistake. Not poor judgment. Organized crime under federal authority cover. Consequences extended beyond courtroom. Department of Homeland Security reviewed every case Kane's unit handled over 2 years. Dozens of deportation orders overturned. Separated families given return pathways. People who lost everything granted rebuilding opportunities. New oversight implemented across ICE enforcement. Civilian review boards established. Mandatory body cameras standard for field operations. Naturalization records moved to blockchain-verified system, making forgery harder, creating audit trails. Reforms came too late for some, but mattered for future. Doctor who lost license during 8-month detention reinstated 2.1 million settlement. Didn't replace 23 years practice, but gave resources to restart. Elderly woman's family who died after deportation, $420,000 compensation. Couldn't bring her back. Couldn't give daughter final months. But acknowledged wrong and acknowledgement mattered. 14 children in foster care during parents' deportation fights reunited with families. Separation trauma stays years, but together again. 3 months later, Diane returned to bench. First day hearing for 23 detained under Kane's quota scheme. Ordered immediate release, dismissed all charges. Told them, 17 years deciding who stays, who leaves. Night ICE raided and detained me 14 hours. I learned what power abuse means, what it feels like having rights stripped by people supposed to protect them. This courtroom won't forget. But case revealed something haunting. Without cameras, Diane could have been deported. Federal judge 17 years bench removed on forged documents with no proof. Without Mrs. Chen calling courthouse evidence destroyed before preservation. Without neighbor filming no independent witness. Diane had 3 things most victims didn't. Camera's attorney who could act immediately, position, making people listen. Most Kane targeted had none. They were silenced, deported, forgotten. That made this case turning point. Kane serves at Federal Facility, Colorado. Parole eligible, 2043. 66 now. Odds of walking free slim. Diane retired 2024. Now trains judges and immigration attorneys on constitutional rights and documentation importance. Her case cited in 47 federal rulings on immigration enforcement and civil rights violations. Lesson simple but matters. Authority collapses when facts recorded and reviewed by people who can't ignore them. Badge doesn't override law. Uniform doesn't grant immunity. One person refusing silence can expose conspiracy destroying dozens of families, corrupting entire system. If ICE raids federal judges' home plants, evidence detains 14 hours, imagine families without power cameras, attorneys who respond immediately. Share this story. Tag someone needing to understand why documentation matters, cameras matter, witnesses who risk involvement matter. Because next, Marcus Kane already operates somewhere counting on silence and invisibility for protection. If you believe accountability applies to everyone, including those with badges and authority, subscribe. More stories like this need telling. More systems need exposing. More victims need knowing they're not alone. Authority is only as powerful as silence protecting it. Moment. Someone records truth and refuses silence, everything changes.